Was this really Britain's shortest ever battle? 380 years ago this month, Huntingdon was stormed by Royalist forces during the so-called Battle of Huntingdon. What happened was typical of the experience of many towns and villages across Britain and Ireland during the brutal civil wars of the 1640s. Background to this was that in June 1645 a civil war had turned in Parliament's favour. The main Royalist army, commanded by Charles I himself, had been defeated at the Battle of Naseby in Northamptonshire on the 14th of June. Most of the king's infantry were captured or killed, and his baggage, including his private correspondence, fell into parliamentarian hands. Parliament's victorious new-modelled army, led by Sir Thomas Fairfax and Oliver Cromwell, marched into the southwest of England to defeat the Royalist forces there and recapture the strategically important port of Bristol. Left with only his cavalry, the king headed first into Leicester, then to the borders of Wales to try and recruit more soldiers. Finding little support, he then headed north in an attempt to join up with the Scots Royalists led by the Marquis of Montrose, only to be blocked by parliamentarian forces in Yorkshire. Turning back south towards his wartime capital at Oxford, King Charles and his cavalry marched down the Great North Road towards Huntingdon. At the time of the Civil War, Huntingdon was a market town, the county town of the ancient county of Huntingdonshire. Its houses, shops and inns were concentrated along the High Street, running along the Great North Road, the main road between London and York. We get an idea of what it looked like from a map drawn by John Speed in 1610, the earliest known map of the town. It had a population of perhaps 1,200 people, not unusual for many towns at that time, as everywhere was much smaller than today. The population of England in the 1640s as a whole was about 5 million, smaller than that of London now. Huntingdon had been fortified in 1643 when an engineer, Mr. Christian, was paid for supervising the defences. The focus, though, had been on creating defences to the south of the town, guarding against attack from the Royalist capital at Oxford. A span of the medieval bridge, which still stands today across the Graver Great Ouse, was removed and replaced with a drawbridge. A gun emplacement was constructed on the old castle site to cover the river crossing. Another artillery earthwork was constructed north of Hertford Road, which still can be seen today, and several earthwork defences built to the north and western sides of Huntingdon, although few traces of these can be seen now. A large artillery platform stood on the northern side of Brampton Road near today's railway station, a smaller one on the eastern side of Ermine Street, and a ditch on Mill Common near to the railway station may still be a surviving part of the Civil War defences. The King's forces, heading south, reached the village of Stilton, north of Huntingdon, on the Sunday the 24th of August 1645. The Royalist forces comprised around 2,500 cavalry. Just south of the village, they encountered around 400 recently recruited and inexperienced parliamentarian cavalry and dragoons, mounted infantry, commanded by Major Gibbs and Captain Poe. The surprised and outnumbered parliamentarians retreated rapidly back to Huntingdon. By the time the Royalists had reached the north side of Huntingdon, there was a brief fight against the town's garrison, commanded by Captain Bennet and supported by Captain Poe. After a short but fierce skirmish in which Ben and Bran were killed on both sides, including Captain Bennet, the parliamentarians broke and ran away. Around 100 of them were taken prisoner. Parliamentarian Newsbook claimed that the garrison fought very bravely, as long as they were able, but the Royalist officer Richard Simmons, who was present at the battle, said that they little disputed Huntingdon, but we entered notwithstanding a large ditch encompassing it, and a breastwork and gate in the road, and that then the rebels ran away to Cambridge. The main barrier to attack mentioned in these accounts was the town drainage ditch, parts of which can still be seen today at the edge of Bloomfield Park. The bridge across the ditch on the High Street was probably where parliamentarian infantry under Captain Bennet briefly resisted the Royalist attack, in the vicinity of where Hodson's Fish and Chip Shop stands today. Local people find musket balls in nearby gardens. Local legend says two of the parish churches in Huntingdon at the time of the Royalist occupation, St John's and St Benedict's, were badly damaged in the fighting in 1645 and had to be demolished. This almost certainly is not true. Only the churchyard of St John's survives today, but there is no suggestion in contemporary accounts that there was anything relating to the fighting to do with this. The church already suffered from poor repair and declining congregations to pay for it, and so St John's was demolished between 1651 and 1660. The tower of St Benedict's Church was taken down in 1802. Having captured the town, King Charles and his forces were welcomed into Huntingdon by the town's mayor, Lionel Walden, and two bailiffs from Godmanchester. The welcome may have been good form, or they may simply have been Royalists. Like many communities, Huntingdon was divided in its loyalty. The mayor presented the king with a tax levy in the hope that the town would be treated well by his soldiers, which Charles agreed to and then used the George Hotel as his headquarters. He wrote a letter to Oxford, basically confirming that his intention to carry on the war at this point, which still survives today, which is dated August 1645, the George Huntingdon. A parliamentary newsbook described how the Royalists broke their word and plundered the town, taking horses, livestock and valuables, emptying the town jail to recruit felons into their army. The newsbook describes how every house had soldiers billeted on them, having to provide board and lodging, though never so poor, some 20 or 30 in a house. Even allowing for exaggeration and propaganda, the impact of an army of 2,500 men, plus their horses, imposing themselves on a population of 1,200 people, must have been immense. Households were taxed, and money extracted with menaces. This pamphlet, The Royal Entertainment of Huntingdon, gives an account in gruesome detail of the case of 73-year-old John Robbins of Godmanchester, who was allegedly tortured by the Royalist soldiers, demanding £300 from him. They hung him up by his feet, put him into stress positions, and allegedly used lit match cord to burn his hands, ears and face. On the 25th of August, as parliamentarian forces were closing in, the Royalists left Huntingdon with their booty and several hostages, including the mayor. A Royalist soldier accused of looting was hanged. The Royal Entertainment proclaimed after the behaviour of the Royalists in the town, even those who supported the king locally changed their mind, swearing that they are more like devils that come out of hell than any sort of men. Whatever the truth, Huntingdon undoubtedly suffered greatly, like many towns and villages across Britain during the Civil Wars. A traveller in 1663 described it as a poor and decayed town, which being on a frequented road was greatly impoverished by the insolence of armies, free quarter, etc., during the late wars.